The gavel came down like a hammer on my chest, guilty on all counts, life without parole, and I swear the air left the room while the bailiff reached for the cuffs, and I tried to memorize the slice of sky through that courthouse window in Riverbend, Missouri. I was thinking about my messy little garden and the kids who still play tag on my block, like the world hasn't gone sideways when a voice from the back cut through the noise. Wait. And three men in suits were already walking fast down the aisle, one with a scar at his jaw, one with surgeon hands, one with that quiet, I can fix the grid look. We're her sons, the first one said. We have evidence that changes everything, and the judge, God bless him, gave them 10 minutes. The oldest turned, our eyes locked, and time folded in on itself. Eli, I breathed, and he said, Hey, Mama Ruth, like love remembered its own name. If you ask me where this story begins, it wasn't that courtroom. It was a night 25 years earlier at 2:41 a.m. when three boys knocked on my door like I had the last light left in the city. I was a widow then, counting pennies against hospital bills, working nights at the school district, stubborn as a fence post and just as tired. I cracked the chainsaw, rain-soaked kids with the posture of people who already know the rules aren't for them. And I said, come in before you catch pneumonia. I made hot chocolate like my mama used to. Milk a pinch of salt, patience, and learned their names over steam. Eli, who cataloged exits without moving his head. Miles, soft-spoken, and already checking everyone else's injuries. Theo, one hand hooked in his brother's hoodie like an anchor. They'd been placed with a cousin by paper and a trafficker by trade, a man named Cole Van, polite as poison, who called kids assets and made them say thank you while he broke them. On the fourth morning, he stepped into my living room without knocking, brought two men with shoulders like refrigerators, offered me $30,000 cash, and a smile that said he'd already done the math on my mortgage. I held that envelope, thought about bald tires and overdue notices, tore it straight down the middle, told him, get out of my house, and his eyes went cold in a way I can still feel on my skin. We didn't get a movie montage for the next 5 years, we got life. Burned pancakes on Sundays because Eli insisted on flipping homework on a table too small for 3 elbows, me pushing through night classes until I walked in a cap and gown at 48. The boys grew. Eli argued zoning laws for sport. Miles volunteered at the clinic and came home smelling like antiseptic, and Hope, Theo, built a computer from parts I'd swear belonged to a vacuum cleaner and a busted radio. And then the phone started ringing. Wrong numbers that knew my name. A black sedan that learned our block. A gentle voice that told me he'd been patient long enough. He mentioned an insurance trust in Eli's file, $500,000 he'd been managing on behalf of his young ward, the kind of paper church folks build when they want sin to look like a document. We met at Grain Wharf 12 on a rain night the river tried to swallow. Cole brought muscle and a boy he'd taken, Noah, who looked at me like he still wanted to believe grown-ups could be true. There was a crowbar from nowhere, a flash of a knife, a gun that skittered. I stepped in front of my boys because that's what mothers do. Paper blood. I don't care. The bullet spun me high and I told them run. I had written letters the night before, 3 of them, the kind that explain the ugly parts you can't say out loud, where to go, who to call, how love keeps breathing even when you can't share a roof. They ran, they lived, and the papers called Cole a philanthropist and me a predator. And I kept my mouth quiet because telling the fuller truth would have painted targets on the only 3 people who ever called me mama like they meant it. 15 years inside teaches you the calendar by the sound of keys, not seasons. On a Tuesday, because it's always a Tuesday, Eli got a letter in my hand. Miles, too, now, a trauma surgeon who put strangers back together for a living. Theo, too, who turned logic into a company with more servers than I have casserole dishes. That same day, the news said Cole had been found dead in a warehouse, and the state said an inmate arranged it to stop testimony, that inmate being me neat as a bow. The boys got a call from a clean voice with no name, meet me where it started, come alone or watch her die, so yeah, they went. At midnight on the wharf, they met a man who wasn't Cole at all. He introduced himself as Drake Hollis, the planner. Said he'd retired Cole years ago, stepped into his shadow, and spent a decade nudging doors open and closed, so my boys would grow into the exact men he wanted to crush in one night. SWAT moved in cuffs, clicked, the city took a breath. Then a second phone rang, and a contingency voice said it plain. Drake dies before sunrise, or your mother dies. No third option. No lawyers, no sermons, choose. Here's where the twist lives. Theo heard a whine under the threat. Not emotion machinery. Printing presses. The kind state buildings use when they want 10,000 of something official. He mapped the noise to the state records annex by the river. Concrete, tiny windows, too many cameras, and the three of them moved like brothers who practiced in different rooms of the same house. I wasn't there for the doors or the stairs. I was downstairs in a basement with enough explosive to put our block on every morning show in America. They taped my wrists to a chair and left a guard who couldn't be more than 25, kept checking the clock like time had personally offended him. "What's your name, baby?" I asked. He said he wasn't supposed to talk, I said. I wasn't supposed to be planning dinner either. "But here we are," he finally said. Riley Ortiz, and I asked if he had people. He said a little sister 8, and his face did that soft thing that tells you where a man's hope lives. He said they told him he was stopping bad people. They didn't mention grandmothers and city blocks. The device in front of us had a red heartbeat and a dead man switch. One wrong hand opens the sky. And there was an override, he said, 5 digits only one person knew. Upstairs, the guards were sweating through bravado elbows, shaking the way Miles has seen 1,000 times in triage. Not fear withdrawal. And Eli told them, "She hasn't paid you," as she and Theo added, "She's going to cut you loose after, because that's what people like this do with witnesses." The first knife hit the rope on Miles's wrists. The guns lowered like shame had weight. And the man said, "What do you need us to do?" The one person with the code stepped out of my past like a storm in shoes. Elena Park. She didn't start as a villain. She started as a sister, Noah's sister. And he didn't make it home that rainy night. He died 3 blocks from safe while she held his hand and promised help was coming. She trained under Drake. She learned patience from pain. She built a cathedral of revenge and moved inside. She stood in my basement with that remote like it was scripture, 6 minutes pick. Which love you want to save, the boys upstairs, or the city, or yourself? I asked her about Noah's birthday. Vanilla cake, blue candles, strawberries on top. And I said the name out loud, because names keep the dead in the room, in a way that makes us honest. She lifted the remote, the red light pulsing, and I said it again. July 15th, 2000. Not certain, just stubborn. Riley typed 7155 Tunru with hands that wanted to be forgiveness. The light went yellow, then green, and you could hear silence get loud. Upstairs, the broadcast Theo had wired into the annex cameras and mics went everywhere at once. Cruisers, stations, inboxes. And Drake said enough on a hot mic to rewrite a decade. Detective Grant Harlow walked a line of men toward a future with paperwork. Elena's eyes were wet in a way that looked like the first rain after a long, dry season, and by sunrise a judge signed the orders that put my name back where it belonged. Not on a roster, but on mail on a driver's license on the front door that creaks 2 notes out of tune. We went home. We burned the first batch of pancakes for accuracy we argued about. Whether ribs count as breakfast, Riley brought his sister, and she ate strawberries like a champion. And for a while Sundays looked like family, with a probation schedule taped to the fridge. Elena took a plea, did her time, came straight to the youth center, We opened on the south side. She runs the program for girls, now speaks grief like a language she can translate. Riley counsels boys who look like he used to. Eli sues cities and gives the checks to the clinic. Miles teaches residents how to stitch without scarring and still gets roasted for using the nice plates. Theo disappears into server racks on Mondays and shows up Fridays with grants approved because he wrote software that proves who's lying in case files. Every now and then, they ask if I want to visit Drake. I go not because forgiveness is a coupon you redeem at will, but because people who deal in damage live off being unseen. I want him to know we saw him clearly and built something beautiful anyway. He says it doesn't count. I say, love isn't technical, you know what I mean. Yeah, that happened. A year later, the governor called on a Tuesday, Mrs. Carter Humanitarian Award, and I put him on hold while I yelled into the kitchen about whoever stacked wet pots on the drying rack like it was Jenga. I told the governor I'd be honored, but I also told him titles don't teach a kid to trust a second time people do. I stood there listening to a house argue about dishes and laugh about nothing, and realized this is the victory, not medals. It's a room full of survivors choosing each other every morning. A file drawer full of vacated convictions, neighborhood kids stealing strawberries and running, like I could catch them if I really wanted to. And if you came for the controversy, it's here too. Should Elena be at my table after what she almost did? Should we visit the man who tried to ruin us, or let silence finish him off? Should a system that failed 3 children, and then failed their mother, be trusted to police itself, or do we need different hands on justice entirely? Tell me what you think. Tell me if choosing love the way we did was soft, or the only kind of strength that lasts. Tell me if a boy who once held a gun can grow into a man who holds a life together. Tell me if forgiveness without accountability is just cheap grace, or if accountability without grace is another kind of prison. Drop a comment, say where you're watching from, share the thing this story poked in you. The courtroom that felt rigged, the lie dressed up as paperwork, the sister who turned grief into a map she finally tore up at the last minute. And if nobody's said this to you recently, let me say it plain. You are not a throwaway person. Not now. Not ever.